Dear students, so again we are going to study this Baby Kamble and chapter 9. Why this chapter is significant? Because it is talking about how the daughter-in-law is being treated in the family and how a woman is going through pain. So this is a very objective perspective given by Baby Kamble, and I would like you to listen it. Possibly you can read it out also on your own, but listen it. In those days, at least one woman in 100 would have her nose chopped off. You may well ask why. It is because of the Sasu who would poison her son's mind. These Sasus ruin the lives of the innocent women forever. Now, chopping off a nose of a woman is a heinous crime, and it is a very severe human right violation. No, anybody, irrespective of their condition, their social status, whatever, no other person has a right to chop off the nose, because it is associated with the existence, dignity, and self-respect and self-belief. So if any part of the body is being chopped off by the other person in the name of culture or some kind of ritual or some kind of rites, this is a severe human right violation. And how this Mahar innocent daughter-in-laws are being ruined by the Sasu or their mother-in-laws. So just because a girl is somebody's daughter-in-law, a Sasu or a mother-in-law has a right to put her in such a dangerous situation where her nose is being chopped off. So this is a very severe and serious offense committed against women, and that is how this chapter becomes very significant. Now listen it carefully. In those days, at least one woman in 100 would have her nose chopped off. You may well ask why. It is because of the Sasu who would poison her son's mind. The Sasu ruined the life of innocent women forever. Every day, the Maharwada would resound with the cries of the helpless woman in some house or the other. Husbands flogging their wives as if they were beasts would do until the stick broke with the efforts. The head of these women would break open, their backbone would be crushed, and some would collapse unconscious. But there was nobody to care for them. They had no food to eat, no proper clothing to cover their bodies, and their hair would remain uncombed and tangled, dry, and lack of oil. Women led the most miserable existence. Please note this line. Women had the most miserable existence. That's what the condition of women is there. That is why we need to study the literature which talk about women atrocities. We need to know what is happening. So that is how, and this is because it's a very, the Dalit narrative we are reading and woman perspective. The entire day, the poor daughter-in-law would serve the entire household like a slave. The Sasu, Sasra, brothers and brother-in-laws, the neighbors she had to serve, one and all. The household chores were no less torturous. Many daughter-in-laws would try to run away to escape this torture. Once night fell, darkness would descend everywhere. At home, in village, in the roads, when nobody was fast asleep, the harsh daughter-in-law would pick up the couple of the rags and run away under the cover of the darkness. It was not at all an easy thing to do. There were no vehicle in those days to take her quickly to her mother's home. The young girl had to be entirely on her own. She had to be extremely careful and watch each step she took. She had to find her way in the pitch dark through hills and valleys and thick forests. She had to cross streams and rivers. Her escape would take place in mortal fear, lest people would knew her in-laws and were watching her. It would take her at least 2 days to reach her mother's home. So a girl who has started to reach her mother's house, she has to walk on her own and without food, without proper clothes, without any protection, and there is always a consistent fear that her in-laws would come and catch her, and finally it will be end of her life. So immediately her heels would follow her brother-in-laws or Sasra or her husband. Nobody, neither her in-laws nor any of the others, had any sympathy for the poor tortured girl. The husband and the in-laws would beat her to pulp. Even her brothers and fathers would flog her mercilessly and ask the in-laws to take her back. The poor girl, numb with pain and hunger, would force to return to her in-laws. So when she has reached to her mother's, her father's house, she has been sent back. And that's how the girl doesn't find any place to secure, safe herself. And that's how the pain and suffering is there. I think there is no escape, and which is so painful. Once she had brought back her in-laws' house, even worse fate awaited her. Her in-laws would take a huge square piece of wood, weighing around 5 kilo, to the carpenter to have stock made for her. The carpenter would drill a hole in the wood big enough for her foot to go through. After this, they would put an iron bar through the side so as to make impossible for her to pull her foot out. The wood itself would be as heavy and large iron tub. She would have to drag this heavy burden each time, and she tried to move. She was forced to work with this device around her. Her legs would get wounded and blood ooze out every time she tried to move her legs. There is let me just draw. There are two, the wood is being made in this way, where in these two holes her foot are being placed, so her foot will be, this way, her foot will be, in this way, her foot will be placed and chained, and this. Now imagine a woman is having this wooden circle and wood around her foot, how she would walk. So this way she would be controlled, and the wood itself would be as heavy and large iron tub. She would have to drag this heavy burden each time she tried to move. She was forced to work with this device around her leg. Her leg would get wounded and blood ooze out every time she tried to move. So this is how the blood is oozing. She was not a human being for in-laws, but just another piece of wood. Her hair would be all tangled and spread around her head in complete disarray. She would be made to wear her younger brother-in-law's copper anklet as bangles, and those copper anklets were a sign that she was Mahar. So these, in the hands also, she has to wear these copper anklets. She would be made to wear her younger brother-in-law's copper anklet as bangles, and those copper anklets were sign that she was a Mahar. So there is a caste stigma or caste identity in terms of jewelry. Besides, she has constantly listened to abuse of her Sasu and Sasra, whose tongue would never tire of lashing out at her. The Sasu would pinch her cheeks, black and blue. Her Sasra would thrash her day and night. The poor girl would endure this torture as long as she could. When it became unbearable, she would run away with the stalks around her bloodied foot. When the girl managed to reach the Maharwada, the people crowd around to see them. With kids found the entire scene extremely curious. The Sasu would pour poison in her ears, a son's ear, against this helpless wife. She would whisper into his ear, "Dhondya, what God is such a runaway wife to you? Some bastard must have made her leave you. She must have had an affair, and you are her husband. But obviously, the bitch prefers someone else. I suspect this somebody is from our own community. This bitch will bring nothing but disgrace to us. No, I don't want such a slut in my house. She wants to ruin your life. Don't let off so easily. Dhondya, cut the tip of her nose. Only then will my mother's breathe easy." So that's how, that this instruction is being given. The information is being passed that cut her nose. Don't bring some shame on your father's name. And don't you worry, I will get you many wives as you want. I will get you remarried in just a couple of days. I have already chosen a girl for you. She has a son from her previous marriage, but don't keep this wife of yours. She is not an all good for you. Otherwise, you will suffer like the woman who brought a farm, an inconspicuous corner, so that she could still her land in peace. But on the way, she met a Musalman and chopped off her nose and breast too. We don't want such a string of problem in our house. So it's not only chopping off her nose, but chopping off her breast too. You can imagine, you could actually, I think we can't imagine what kind of severe punishment these daughter-in-laws go through. This speech was followed by drama of shedding false tears, which the Sasu pretended to wipe off with her sari. She would then hide her face in it, and after a suitable pause, she would continue. What would this slut have done if she had to suffer like this? Probably she would have committed suicide. God, we did not even dare to speak to the dog and her in-laws' house disrespectfully. Even when we had to shoo them away, we had to dress them with respect. We did not get food to eat for 4 days at stretch. We had to stealthily pluck leafy vegetables from the field, cook them, gobble them down with my salt. Even these would be difficult to get. We had to suffer so much. Oh how we much suffered, just like Sita suffered during her exile. So, the paradox is the Mahar community women, they are being exploited and excluded by the Maratha women, Patil women, but they herself torture their daughter-in-laws, and that is what, very objectively Baby Kamble is mentioning this. So torrential tears would follow this outburst. Then the Sasara would take her. He would urge his son to be brave. You are a man. You must behave like one. You must be proud and firm, and you must walk. Twill your moustache and show us that you are a man. Are you wearing bangles like women? Then, do you know that about the Ajja of yours? He was a distant relative. Of course, let me tell you, he was a real hero among men, and he could fell down above any wild beast, however ferocious at one stroke. He used to carry an axe with him all the time. Once his wife smiled at his cousin finish. He lured her with sweet words, took her to the field and just axed her down, cut her into pieces, and then their entire Maharwara trembled on hearing this. Such is your lineage, remember. Never mind if you have to go to prison for 6 months. You must chop off your wife's nose. So this is how the preparation is, mental preparation of going on. That the boy has to chop off his wife's nose. This speech would go to son's head. His ego would inflate like a balloon. Then both father and son would make a plan chopping off the girl's nose. The Sasara would go to her mother's place and sweet words and bring her back. Meanwhile, son would keep ready razor sharpened to an edge. The son would keep ready a razor sharpened to an edge. At night, he would sit on her chest and taking his time cut her nose. Then they would drive the poor girl out of house, the blood pouring from the mutilation. None of these relatives will give her shelter. She was called muddy with the refuse entering in the so-called good homes. Then her Sasu would happily arrange second marriage for her son and some divorced woman with a couple of children. She would feel elated that the harassment she had suffered was being finally compensated for. An innocent girl would thus be sacrificed to atone for a Sasu's suffering. Such inhuman practice were quite rampant almost till 1940s. So you can understand how the girl's nose is chopped off and how women are suffering. This is a very objective and a very, feminine, how the patriarchal setup is ruining the life. The poor girl will ill-starred, and at where Mahar women were supposed to draw their palla forward from the forehead down to the nose. And if an innocent child bride was found to have neglected this, and if nobody saw her palla down, back even in a little, it was a provocation enough for all the Sasus around to pounce upon her. Immediately they would taunt her, "Hey, from where have you obtained such a daughter-in-law? Her mother must have been a slut. Why, her pallav just doesn't stay on her head. Whenever we look at her, it is always up or on her head." Okay. Then the Sasu would add fuel to fire. "Now, see of yourself, otherwise you will blame me and not being able to stand her. With what should I tell you, my friend? You ask me about her mother, right? What shall I tell you? Such a slut she is. God knows what she does. And this once here is the child, isn't it? What else can you expect then? Like mother, like daughter. A slut daughter will be slut. A good woman's daughter will be good woman. Fix her palla on her head with a nail. That's the only way to make it stay there. The bitch her mother deceived, and she has tied a kalwatin around her neck. Tell me, Atyabai, what will happen to my son? How will he survive with this woman?" And he is simple-minded and as Lord Shiva. Again, tearful talk would follow. "Kaki, it's all right till we are alive. But what will happen after all?" This bitch will twist him around her little finger. Then the Sasu would begin to wail loudly. Her companion would gladly join the wailing. Such was the life of our poor helpless daughter-in-laws. The life of a woman in the lower caste was thus shaped by the fire of calamities. This made their body strong, but their mind cried out against this oppression. A woman is sattva and shield incarnation. She can put even her creator to shame, just as Chaturvarna system created caste and sanctioned discriminatory practices. The cunning creator of the world established the practice of making women dependent on man. Men have therefore dominated women ever since. But a woman is goddess Amba on the earth who gave birth to a man and sustained that unjust creature with her airy, very lifeblood. After having undergone an ordeal of fire and ages, she finally gave birth to a divine flame. This flame showed the world what virtue, love, and affection. It then tore off the net in which men had trapped women for ages and rescued them. This was what I know as Hindu code bill. The man who gave birth to Hindu code bill was my King Bhima, the son of morality, savior of the world. It is because of him that my pen can scribble out some thoughts. It is because of him that I have understood truth and that I can now see how morality is being trampled upon. It is because of him that I got the inspiration to join the struggle against oppression and contribute to my small might to it. So here, the answer why this book is there and why this, purpose of this. So she got the inspiration from Ambedkar, and that is how you have to remember. Now, last few paragraphs, and then after that we are able to finish this chapter. In a sense, I am grateful to Veergaon and the people who nurtured me with their love. In fact, Veergaon has lion's share in helping me perceive truth. I will never forget the love they bestowed upon me since my birth. I would enter in any house that I wanted. I was completely engulfed in the relationship I had formed with them, women and children each, and I would move among them, calling them Mama and Mami. The woman of the house would bring out plates full of dried piece of meat from a storage jar. There would be maggots in some of the bones. She would brush them off in hot sun. Once the meat pieces were clean enough, she would put them to cook in a big earthen pot. She would roast some onions over the piece of the burning coal and grind them all to all the powder on the grinding stone. Then she would put a piece of coal in this mixture of the piece to make it green. Once the meat pieces were cooked, she would add the spices to it with some jowar flour to thicken the dish. Then the woman would make a big jowar bakri. The sasu first would serve the food to the menfolk and the children. Each of them would get a big plateful of the meat dish, along with some 6 bakaris and some raw onion. Children usually shared the plates with the man. Bakaris would be mixed with the meat, and children would eat with lusty appetite. All of us children would look for delicacies like liver. Everybody would invite me to have a share from their plate. The taste of that food is still fresh on my tongue. Even great dish for so-called posh hotels fade in comparison to the food we had. In those days, there was no distinction between breakfast and lunch. Breakfast itself would be like lunch. Nobody knew about tea, and it was made only in my Ajji's house. My Ajja was a butler, and hence he was used to having tea. So we too got into the habit of drinking tea. Just the two of us, Ajji and I, lived in the house in Veergaon. Ajji used to prepare tea in the morning, and we would eat stale bakri left over from the last night meal with the tea. Then Ajji would go to collect firewood with the other woman, and I would roam all over the places visiting my house I wanted. I would sit down to eat with everybody and would finish cooking. Dry meat piece would be available only with the mahars of the 16 share. The other houses did not have anything to eat. Those people were like insects crawling around in hunger with no food to eat. At least a couple of people would be ill in each house, lying down in bed. They would almost be lifeless and hunger, since even ordinary food was scarce. In their desperate search for solution, they clung to the belief that sick man could become well with simple remedies. And then they would come to my Ajji's house and say, Sita, everybody in my house is sick, they are all down. So, though your tea would then help. Tea is the real remedy. People get well immediately. And once Malhari also gave me a bowl of tea, and my sickness just disappeared. So I thought maybe I should give all my people bowl of tea. My Ajji would advise, Attabai, get sugar worth 3/4 of the paisa, get tea powder worth a damdi, then boil a jar of water in pan, then put sugar and tea powder in and bring it to boil. Your entire household will be able to drink tea. Oh, but there is no pan in my house. All right, then the heat water in a tawa, and once started boiling, remove it from the fire and strain, and the tea will be ready. The woman would follow Ajji's advice and give everybody tea to drink, and they will feel better after drinking tea. They believed that the tea was a good medicine. In those days, the tawas were not flat like the modern ones. They would be deep, like flattish bowl. The whole family could drink tea in 1 paisa, and they would not afford to drink tea because they could not afford even that 1 paisa. They breathed, therefore, then they were supposed to be alive. Each generation left the children to serve their oppressors and quietly got wiped off from the fact of the earth. People had a lifespan of hardly 30 or 40 years. One generation perished, but the next generation would be ready to serve Mother Earth and monster ruling over. On the one side, there was entire society, arrogant and insolent, enjoying wealth and comfort. On the other side, there were people dying without food, like fish out of water. But character, truth and morality, the oppressor did not die. The 3 qualities merged and realized in the form of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. He was our Baliraja who gave away his kingdom for truth. He was like Pavan who squared around his kingdom for character. He was Buddha who taught love, brotherhood, equality unto all. He was our Bhima, our king and our savior, who blessed the blind and with sight. He was the weapon forced out of the perfect blend of the three qualities of the character, truth and morality, fight injustice, and to break the chains of slavery that shackles our feet. So this is how I end this chapter here. It's Baby Kamble, the prison we broke, and I was reading chapter 9. So you have seen how the daughter-in-laws are being abused and tortured, and this is a very wonderful objective narrative Baby Kamble has presented before us. Subscribe this channel, come and visit again. I'm mostly uploading those videos which are very significant for your examination, and believe me, if you are missing these videos, you will be missing a lot. So please visit the channel, listen it carefully, share with your friends, and all the best. Thank you so much.